December 1776. The American Revolution is effectively over. In just 5 months, the Continental Army has been reduced from a spirited force of 20,000 to a starving, shivering band of fewer than 3,000 men. They have been beaten, humiliated, and hunted across 3 colonies. George Washington, the man entrusted with the fate of a new nation, privately writes to his brother, "I think the game is pretty near up." Enlistments are set to expire in days. The British are offering pardons to anyone who swears loyalty to the King, and thousands are taking them. The Declaration of Independence, signed with such fanfare in July, now looks like a death warrant. But history turns on the smallest of hinges. This is the story of how a rebellion on the brink of total collapse was saved by a dense fog, a change in wind, and one desperate gamble on Christmas night. To understand the desperation of winter, we have to go back to the optimism of summer. In July 1776, the colonies declared independence. But while the ink was drying in Philadelphia, the Empire was striking back in New York. General William Howe arrived with the largest expeditionary force Great Britain had ever sent abroad. We are talking about a forest of masts. 32,000 professional soldiers, including thousands of feared German mercenaries, the Hessians. They were supported by 70 warships and 400 transports. Facing them, George Washington and a divided, inexperienced army of about 19,000 men. Washington had to defend New York City, a geographic nightmare of islands and rivers that gave the British Navy total control. Washington made a critical error. He split his forces, placing a significant portion of his army on the western tip of Long Island in Brooklyn Heights. He was expecting a frontal assault, but General Howe was no fool. He didn't want to just beat the Americans. He wanted to end the war in a single afternoon. 27th. While Hessian troops distract the Americans from the front, Howe executes a brilliant maneuver. He marches 10,000 men silently through the night, locating the unguarded Jamaica Pass on the American left flank. At 9 a.m., the trap snaps shut. The Americans hear cannon fire not from in front of them, but from behind them. Panic ensues. The Continental Army dissolves into chaos. Men are bayoneted in the woods or drown in the marshes trying to escape. The only thing preventing total annihilation is a group of soldiers known as the Maryland 400. They launch a suicidal countercharge against the British lines, buying precious time for the rest of the army to retreat to the fortifications at Brooklyn Heights. Washington watches from a hill as his men are slaughtered, reportedly saying, "Good God, what brave fellows I must this day lose." By sunset, the Americans are trapped with their backs to the East River. The British dig in for a siege. They have Washington cornered. This should have been the end. The British Navy was positioned to sail up the river and cut off any escape. But then, the weather intervened. A strong northerly wind prevented the British ships from moving upriver. Washington orders a secret evacuation. Every boat, sloop, and skiff is gathered. Throughout the night of August 29th, a regiment of fishermen from Marblehead, Massachusetts, rows the army across the mile-wide river to Manhattan. But as dawn breaks, a significant portion of the army is still on Long Island. If the British see them, they will be massacred. Then, a miracle. As the sun rises, a dense fog rolls in, so thick that men couldn't see 6 yards ahead. Under this cloak of white, the last of Washington's army slips away. When the fog lifts, the British are stunned. The trenches are empty. Washington has escaped with 9,000 men. It is one of the greatest military escapes in history, but it is still a retreat. The escape saves the army, but it doesn't save their morale. The next 3 months are a catastrophe. The British invade Manhattan at Kip's Bay. The American militia panic and run without firing a shot. Washington, in a rare fit of rage, throws his hat on the ground and screams, "Are these the men with which I am to defend America?" In November, Fort Washington falls, and with it, 3,000 men and critical supplies are captured. Washington is forced to retreat across the Hudson and into New Jersey. General Howe pursues them, but leisurely. He calls it a fox hunt. He offers pardons to the locals, and the locals accept. The revolution seems to be evaporating. Thomas Paine, traveling with the army, writes the famous lines on a drumhead by a campfire. These are the times that try men's souls. The summer soldier and the sunshine patriot will, in this crisis, shrink from the service of their country. By December, Washington crosses the Delaware River into Pennsylvania. He has fewer than 6,000 men fit for duty. He orders all boats on the river to be seized or destroyed to stop the British pursuit. Safe for the moment, but facing a deadline. On December 31st, the enlistments for most of his army expire. On January 1st, Washington will be a general without an army. He needs a victory, or the revolution dies with the year 1776. Across the river, in Trenton, New Jersey, is a garrison of 1,500 Hessians under Colonel Johann Rowell. They are confident, despising the rebels as country clowns. Washington devises a plan that is equal parts brilliant and insane. He will cross the ice-choked Delaware River on Christmas night and attack at dawn. The night of December 25th is a nightmare. A severe nor'easter strikes. Snow turns to sleet and hail. The river is full of massive blocks of floating ice. 2 of the 3 American columns fail to make the crossing. Only Washington's group makes it, but they are 3 hours behind schedule. They will lose the element of darkness. Washington decides to press on. The password for the night is grimly appropriate: victory or death. At 8 a.m., the Americans storm into Trenton. The Hessians are caught completely off guard. This isn't a set-piece battle, it's a raid. American artillery blasts down the narrow streets. Colonel Rowell tries to rally his men, but is shot and mortally wounded. Within 45 minutes, it's over. It is a stunning total victory. But the British are furious. Lord Cornwallis rushes to New Jersey, determined to crush this nuisance once and for all. A week later, Cornwallis pins Washington against the Assunpink Creek. The British general decides to wait until morning to attack, famously saying, "We've got the old fox safe now. We'll go over and bag him in the morning." But Washington pulls his old trick. He leaves a skeleton crew to keep the campfires burning and make digging noises, fooling the British sentries. Meanwhile, he wraps the wheels of his cannon in cloth and marches his entire army around the British flank toward Princeton. The next morning, near Princeton, the Americans collide with a British rearguard. The American militia begins to waver. In a moment of supreme courage, Washington rides directly to the front line, just 30 yards from the British muskets. He waves his hat and shouts, "Parade with me, my brave fellows." A volley erupts. Smoke covers the field. When it clears, Washington is still there, unharmed. His men rally. The British line breaks. Trenton and Princeton were small skirmishes by European standards, but their impact was seismic. In 10 days, Washington had reversed 6 months of defeat. He had driven the British out of most of New Jersey and proven that the Continental Army could not only survive, could win. News of the victories crossed the Atlantic. In Paris, King Louis XVI and his ministers took note. This wasn't just a peasant uprising anymore. It was a war worth investing in. 1776 was the year the American Revolution should have died. It was a year of hubris, disaster, and near annihilation. But in the frozen mud of New Jersey, the cause transformed into a country. The British would hold New York City for the rest of the war, but they would never again come this close to extinguishing the torch of liberty. The miracle of 1776 reminds us that history is rarely inevitable. It is often decided by the resilience of a few people who refuse to accept that the game is up. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the darkest days of the Revolution, be sure to subscribe and hit the bell. We have more forgotten chapters of history coming your way. Thanks for watching.